Greetings all. Happy Friday. This is Mark Vigoroso, founder and CEO of the Enterprise Edge. And this is the Enterprise Edge podcast coming to you again. And we are very pleased today to be joined by Mike Gugluizza, Director of Enterprise Business Applications at Accuray. He's based out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. He's got some great insights to share regarding the journey that company is on. He's been working with folks like SAP and NTT Data Business Solutions, pretty major players when it comes to enterprise software, as well as systems integrators. And as always, has been the theme this week, we're looking at how AI is evolving within real world use cases, specifically with regards to some of the capabilities under the covers at SAP, but also more broadly, the overall strategy at Accuray and how some of these moves they're making is in alignment with that strategy. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. We are going to round out the week with a bang. Before we do that, let's give Mike a proper welcome. Mike, thanks for being with us today.
Mark, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to share whatever knowledge and insights I can.
No worries. Thank you for being here. And like I said, it's a Friday, and so we're gonna have some fun and hopefully learn some things. I know I will. So as we always do, if anyone has comments, questions, please drop them into the comments field below. We will always come back and engage. I think a lot of what we're going to talk about here today is widely applicable, not just in the industries that we'll be specifically dealing with today, but I think a lot of it is portable to other industries and certainly to other customers of SAP and NTT as well. So let's dive in. We'll do as we always do. We'll get warmed up a little bit with some icebreakers, Mike, and I've done some research. I'm usually about 90% correct with the research that I've done. So feel free to tell me I got something totally wrong. But I think as far as I'm told, you've traveled a path that has taken you through a few different industries: pharmaceutical, healthcare, financial services, manufacturing. And I think you've spent some time at Accenture as well as a consultant there. And I'm wondering, how has AI changed how either you or perhaps colleagues that you know or have observed, how they are evaluating, selecting, deploying, and scaling enterprise apps? Let's just say over the last, year or two.
Sure. So correct. I have worked across multiple industries. You mentioned Accenture. So I started my career with Accenture. So spent about a decade doing consulting, which means I go where the customer is. And a company like Accenture, they essentially deal with, Fortune 100 companies. So I had the opportunity to work across multiple industries. The last two industries I've really been primarily focused on is really the healthcare, life sciences, pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, though, in terms of how is AI, changing the marketplace, I think what I've seen, especially in the last couple of years, it actually is very industry dependent. Some industries are obviously much more highly regulated than other industries. Yep. Pharmaceuticals, life sciences, there's a plethora of regulations that those organizations need to abide by. Similar in financial services, which I worked in that industry for a couple of different organizations. They also have, very stringent regulations when it comes to banking and investments and so forth. And then you look at somewhere like manufacturing, where sure, they've got their own regulations, but very different than some of the other types of industries out there. So what I found is those industries that are much more highly regulated tend to approach AI in a much more conservative manner. Are they interested? Absolutely. Do they see the benefits? I think they absolutely do. Do they have the ability to, let's say, go as rapidly after AI and start to, get creative, think outside the box, start to implement AI solutions? They do, but like I said, at a much slower pace, a more controlled pace, such that if they're going to implement a technology, they need to always ensure all the regulations, anything that they are held accountable to, AI has to fall within that framework. And in the industry that I'm in right now, which is kind of a hybrid, I'm going to say, because I'm in life sciences. So we are in the healthcare, but at the end of the day, we also are a manufacturer. So we we build devices that treat patients for cancer. So we do have a lot of opportunity from a manufacturing side where AI can really play a big part in, let's say, in our plants, in our manufacturing sites. But at the same time, we are beholden, to many medical driven regulations. So
Yeah.
I would say that we've figured out how to strike a balance where we are going after AI. We have implemented AI solutions, but we are going at a pace where we are making sure that we have AI governance, that we are thinking about the data, whether it's PHI, whether it's PII or so forth. We have to always have that top of mind because we
Yeah.
can't implement some solutions that may have, a tremendous upside in terms of automation as an example, and yet we look past or we don't take into account, the need for us to maintain absolute, you know, regulatory oversight and management and control of all the PHI, all the data that we have. So I would say in a very long-winded answer, I think that the industries are giving a fairly large amount of direction in terms of how fast, how rapid organizations are adopting AI.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's wise. I think that's true. And there are uniquenesses, like you said, depending on the industry. There are commonalities and things that are portable, like I said, but there's also, like you said, different regulatory and legal constraints in some cases, different security constraints, right? Different levels of risk, different levels of stakes. Some are very high stakes where lives are at stake, and sometimes it's not the case. So the ability to run an autonomous workflow perhaps is greater where there literally are not lives at stake in some cases. So
Absolutely. And one thing I've
yeah,
noticed as well but we also have the commonalities. And
yeah,
this is what I found, which is why, while I've worked across multiple industries,
mm,
some would say I'm almost, when it comes to IT, putting on my IT, perspective,
mm,
um, I'm fairly agnostic
yeah,
because no matter which industry you're in, I'm always going to be supporting, again, from an enterprise perspective, I'm always going to be, supporting a finance functional area, and
right,
accounts payable, and accounts receivable, um, order to cash. Those are the common business areas that
yeah,
regardless of which industry you're in, all those organizations have the same functions.
right,
And those opportunities I find, how can we better automate? How can we, build this almost hands-free workflow? It's the same common challenges, or what I would say, all of these areas face the same opportunities.
mm,
Again, it's a matter of, but was the rest of the organization, outside of accounts payable, accounts receivable, and so forth, does the organization still, are they risk adverse or are they much more, less conservative? That they
yeah,
do want to go after those opportunities that are there for really any organization.
right. Interesting. Mike, why don't you give us a quick thumbnail on Accuray? Just take a quick pause, just kind of the business that you're in, the size and
Mhm.
scope and scale, and maybe kind of what your remit is day to day.
Sure. So Accuray, which not a lot of people have heard of Accuray,
Mhm.
and what I always like to say is it's one of those companies where, you know, to be honest, you never want to use one of our products, but if you do, you're extremely grateful to know that it's there. So
Mhm.
what we do is we're in life sciences, we're a medical device manufacturer.
Mhm.
So we design, develop, manufacture very sophisticated AI-driven radiotherapy devices that treat patients with cancer.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? So there's all types of different cancers in the world, unfortunately. And there's different treatment plans that patients can go through, again, depending on, what's the guidance from their doctor, from their oncologist, and so forth. Some treatments involve, chemotherapy. Some treatments involve radiation. Well, some of the challenges with that is with chemotherapy, you're going after killing those cancer cells, but a byproduct of that is you're destroying many healthy cells
Yeah.
in your body as well. It's the price of that type of therapy.
Yeah.
There's also targeted radiation, which again, you're killing the cancer cells, but you're still touching, a certain amount or diameter of healthy cells as well. And what I say is, okay, that's for one thing, if you have, let's say, a tumor on your arm, okay, 90% of the radiation is getting the tumor, 10% maybe the little areas around it. Okay, I'm willing to trade that off so that I can cure, my cancer.
Yeah.
What if that tumor was on your brain?
Yeah.
How much actual healthy cells would you be willing to accept that gets damaged in order to, effectively treat that tumor?
Yeah.
Or it's near your heart or another major organ. What
Mhm.
Accuray does is we target the cancer cells down to 1/100th of a width of hair
Mm.
in terms of our targeted radiotherapy treatment.
Wow.
Meaning we treat the cancer cells, we do not impact or include or otherwise, what's what I'm looking for? Otherwise damage any
Mhm.
healthy cells that goes along with that. And not only do we do that, but when you're getting your treatment and where the AI comes into place is we have predictive AI in terms of targeting,
Mm.
meaning when you're laying there and that treatment is happening, your body's moving, as much as you can just lay perfectly still, you have to breathe. You might, just flinch, whatever have you. The way that our treatment and the way that AI comes into play, AI takes into account your age, your sex, the type of cancer you have. What is the what is the anticipated movement of your body as all of the cameras that are focused on you are absorbing and trending exactly how your breathing pattern works. Plus, it takes a tremendous amount of data from other similar types of patients. So if you move, if your chest is going up and down, we will absolutely um, already know how your body is going to move, and our treatment follows. It follows the cancer cells. It
Wow.
literally will follow them. So
Wow.
if you do move, if you do slightly, you're breathing, and let's say the cancer is somewhere, if you have breast cancer,
Yeah.
it's still going to follow only those cancer cells and not any of the healthy cells.
Wow. That's impressive. Now, tell me about in terms of either employees or revenue. How big is the operation?
Sure. So we have approximately about 1,500 employees.
Okay.
We are global, so we're a worldwide organization.
Hmm.
We have our devices. So when we build our devices, we're not selling to, the end customer. We're not selling to
Right.
patients. We're selling to, hospitals, oncology centers, and so forth.
Yeah.
So our devices are in place, and I believe in about 62 different countries around the world.
Oh,
And
wow.
we continue to expand that market because, again, unfortunately, you, a friend, a relative, at some point, cancer is going to touch your life.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, it's what I think about our product is it's a product that I never want to have to use. But if
Right.
I do have to use it, I am so grateful that I know that it's out there, that it's there, that
Yeah.
that type of, precise treatment is an option that I could explore for
Yeah.
someone that I know. In terms of overall size of company, so again, global, 62 countries, about 1,500 employees. Our revenue is we're in about the 500 million per year uh,
Yep.
revenue revenue market. So
Yep. Yep.
absolutely, I would consider ourselves, we're absolutely mid-sized. And
Yeah.
as we're talking to our vendors, someone like an SAP, an NTT, we fit directly in that middle target of mid-tier organizations, just
Right.
from a size, a revenue perspective, and so forth.
Right.
Um, so that's really where our organization sits. We do not
That's
have
awesome.
a large product line. The devices and the treatments that we sell, we only have really about three major treatment devices. Now, there's a tremendous amount of additional functionality that those devices can have on them. Um, we can have a very, stripped down bare bones
Mm.
type of device that, again, it treats cancer, it treats the healthy cells. But there's a number of add-ons, additional services, diagnostics, and so forth that you can add on to that device that you can make it as sophisticated as you absolutely want to. Obviously, there's a price difference,
Yeah.
but we really do take that into account.
No, it's interesting. It's really helpful to get a sense for that, right? In terms of just
Mhm.
the scope and scale, the criticality, the product life cycle. These are all attributes that I think allow people who are listening and will listen to just put themselves in the context of this story, right? You know,
Mhm.
how similar is this story to what they're dealing with? And like you're absolutely right. Midsize, you could say SMB, mid market. There are some
Mhm.
unique challenges and opportunities that may not exist for much larger organizations. So that's helpful. But given that context, and we'll kind of jump into the SAP and NTT journey here. Um, uh, my research tells me that you guys have a bit of a history with prior vendors like
Mhm.
Oracle and others. Um, and I think we've all learned very hard lessons about tech debt and what happens
Mhm.
when you over customize and you modify and you create all this orphan branch code. And you know, it's
Yeah.
very, very hard to maintain and expensive to maintain and upgrade. So SAP has been beating the drum for a long time around clean core.
Clean core, clean core,
And
clean core. Yes, I
yeah,
hear
clean
that.
core. And I think you guys are now at the stage where you've gone through rides with SAP and you're running S4 HANA and you have, and again, enterprise data management is a job that's never done, right? But it seems to me that you guys are in a fairly good spot with regards to that. And as a consequence, when it comes to AI readiness,
Mhm.
a fairly good spot in terms of, you know, as data goes, so goes your prognosis with regards to getting value from AI because,
Agree.
you know, data is the fuel for AI. And so I
Mhm.
guess the question buried in there is when you thought about the path you wanted to take with SAP, were
Mhm.
you guys deliberate about saying, you know what, we want to deploy standard config. We don't want to customize till the cows come home. We don't want to personalize. We want standard clean core because we see Joule coming, we see AI coming, and we
Mhm.
believe we're going to be well served. Or was it just or is it just the former part of that question? It was we just want to be good with our ERP data hygiene, and whatever comes after that comes after that. How intentional was that decision? I guess is what I'm asking.
Sure. So I'm going to say, first off, all of the above.
Yep.
But when we talk about being intentional, so we did almost a complete 180 of where
Yep.
we came from. So when I joined the organization a few years ago, we were still on our legacy ERP, which was Microsoft Dynamics.
Okay.
We had been on Dynamics for probably about 12 years.
Hmm.
And when I joined the organization, I quickly learned we had customized ourselves into a corner, an absolute corner, meaning there were for the last 3, 4 years when we were on Dynamics, we actually could not even do an upgrade because it would have been likely less work and effort if we would just re-implement the entire solution just
Hmm.
because of the amount of customization that we put in. So knowing that that's where, our legacy was coming from. And as I joined and we have already made the decision, we're going to, sunset Dynamics. We're not going to go with, re-implementing, or we're not even going to go with the latest version of Dynamics. We did our due diligence. We looked at all the different vendors out there. SAP was chosen for many reasons. But as we went in, that was one of the absolute driving factors that I stated. We are not bringing our baggage with us. We are not bringing the customization forward. SAP was created as a best of breed tool for a reason.
Yep.
The out of the box, fit to standard configurations and processes, those are built because those work, because SAP is cross industry. Are we really that special? And I would continue to ask our business folks, do we really think we're that special that our processes are better than, if we were to just take SAP out of the box and we feel that we need to customize this, and again, until the cows come home.
Yeah.
So my going in intention and essentially my conviction was we're going fit to standard. And when we say, was I thinking, about just the system or what comes next? I was thinking about both. So first off, I wanted to make sure that when we go live, we're using this as an opportunity not only to put a new system in, but we're going to revisit all of our processes and say, this is our chance to move so far away from all this customized, not only code, but these processes that we created well over a decade that were based on, external spreadsheets
Yeah.
and knowledge in people's heads and customized programs here and there. I wanted us to be able to, again, leave the baggage behind. Look at SAP, look at how the processes would work if we truly did do out of the box. And
Right.
does that allow us to be more efficient, have more accurate data, do less, external, inputs like thousands of spreadsheets?
Right.
And could we become a much more, best practice type of organization? And this went across every business function that we had,
Mm.
finance, order to cash, accounts payable, all of them. Let's implement SAP the way that it was designed. Let's obviously look at where do we differ. We're a medical device company. We're not, making cereal. We're not making cars. So we do need to understand where do we have specific needs that we may have to look at what is the design of SAP. And
Mm.
what we found, and I'm actually very, very proud of this, what we found is, yes, we have unique needs and requirements, but
Mm.
we can meet those. We can actually deliver against those um, by just configuring the system the way that we need it, as opposed to customizing anything. We can do it via config, and
Mm.
just because you configure it one way doesn't mean you're customized. You still absolutely have that clean core.
Right.
So not only did that allow us to start out of the gate with a clean core system with customizations that are not brought forth, and that allowed us to take advantage of, out of the box best practice.
Yep.
But I absolutely knew that the cleaner we are, the less customization we have, it's going to pay dividends for us, post go live and as we move forward down our roadmap.
Yeah.
Um, Things like AI, we can take advantage of Joule and many of the other capabilities or add-ons that SAP is going to offer because we're using the system as it was designed.
Right.
We're about to go through an upgrade. We're
Yep.
kicking off an upgrade in September.
Yep.
That upgrade, and we've already used SAP's Upgrade Analyzer, which I love that tool.
Mm-hmm.
By the way,
Mm.
we are roughly 95% fit to standard. We
Wow.
have about 5% customization.
Mm.
One of the ways we got there is any request for customization that has to come past my desk.
Mm.
I have to actually approve it before we will customize anything in SAP. And as you can see, 95% fit to standard means I don't say yes very often at
Yeah.
all. I will really push back on our development team, on our business users, on my technical team, because there's got to be more ways that we can solve this problem or deliver this functionality besides customization. I want to see all the different options. And, there's some times where customization may need to happen, but I will say that in those instances where it is very minor customization, very
Right.
minor.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's a discipline, right? And you guys, you've described a process discipline that becomes a cultural discipline, and
Mhm.
ultimately it pays off in how agile and how fast you can move, which is great. I'm curious. We mentioned NTT. Did you guys make the SAP decision alongside of the NTT decision, or were those two different decisions?
Very different decisions.
Okay.
And in fact, it goes a little bit further because NTT was actually not our implementation partner.
Okay.
Uh, we actually worked with a company called Cognizant.
Oh, yes.
Cognizant was actually chosen to do the implementation right alongside.
Okay.
So, and again, that was about a 2.5 year project,
Yep.
which included, and something that you had asked earlier, prior to really kicking off the formal implementation, we
Mm-hmm.
spent about 9 months
Mm-hmm.
as, let's say, a precursor to the project, just cleaning our data.
Mm.
It took that long, 9 months, to go and review the data, cleanse the data, remove the duplicates, look at all the different areas where our data was not being used in, let's say, a customer master record. If the
Mm.
customer is in the US, we're filling out all the customer master data fields this way. Exact same fields over in, let's say, our Asia Pac region. They were using fields, the exact field, but for a different purpose.
Right.
So all of this mismatch of data.
Mm.
And we knew going into it that if our data is not clean, one, our testing scenarios are going to be a nightmare.
Yep.
Two, all our data conversions are going to be, so many different versions and flavors. And that's just not, it's not how you want to go into a new system. You
Right.
want to go in, again, as clean as possible. And what
Hmm.
you said earlier, managing your master data, it's a job that never ends.
Right.
It is not a one and done.
Mm.
And, I'll even say that we're not perfect in that space.
Mm.
We spent a lot of time cleaning the data before we really went into the project and did the implementation and so forth. Once we went live, our, let's just say the passion around maintaining our data was soon replaced with all the other stuff that this new system can do. And we lost a little of our focus,
Mm.
keeping the data clean
Yep.
to the point that about a year post go live, we had to have a follow up project because we saw that our customer master data across three different systems was now, we had mismatches again, we had duplicates. So we had to regroup those areas and say, guys, we need to redo our data again.
Mm.
And we knew exactly So we knew exactly what caused us to have to do that. And we knew those missteps that we took in that first year that put us in that situation. So while we did go through the project, we did clean up our data. We do have consistency now across three different systems, along with what is the system of record, SAP. We knew the steps that we needed to change and implement processes. So going forward, we wouldn't have to do this again. We knew that if we can standardize the way that our data is entered, that we limit the number of users and who they are that can update this data. Those are just some really basic, changes, processes that we implemented that says we're coming up on 3 years of being live with S4. We did that after year one where we had to revisit. We don't have that again on my roadmap. We're not going back and doing another master data deep dive cleansing, knock on wood, because we put those processes in place that are not going to allow us to get there again. So that's really what our approach with the master data is. And again, it not only avoids having to do all this rework and this cleansing, it's going to make our testing with our upcoming upgrade, it's going to make our testing go that much smoother. And lastly, to the AI piece, as you mentioned, our master data, that's basically the gold. Like that's what drives AI. The fact that we can rely on and we trust the data means that the AI solutions that we build on top of that, likewise, are going to bring that much more value because the data is no longer suspect.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom there. We start to peel the weeds, and I have like 40 other questions, but we're not going to have time to get to all of them. But this is
Sure.
really helpful. Um, I guess here's what I'll ask, because I think you mentioned earlier the legacy, the history around Accuray, and some of the ways that you guys do things like tracking the cancer cells and the
Mhm.
laser precision and all of that. And you could even argue that there's been a brand of AI that you guys have been pursuing for decades before it's been known as generative AI or agentic AI, right? It's almost like,
Mhm.
where have y'all been? We've been doing this for a long time, but
Sure.
now, to your point, you're looking at things like Joule, SAP Joule, and so I'm curious. Maybe it's just a simple question, which was how do you think in the near term you
Mhm.
will leverage a capability like Joule
Mhm.
in like real terms? Like where
Mhm.
have you guys identified actual use cases different from say the clinical use cases that you guys have been pursuing for years? This is more, I guess you could say maybe back office use cases with Joule,
Mhm.
the ERP side of things. Tell me a little bit about some of that specifically.
Sure. So there's something that we just recently went live with, which we've been talking about for years,
Hmm.
and we really just didn't have the tools in place yet. And for this one, this was not Joule.
Hmm.
This is a different AI tool set that we use, but we have years and years and years worth of data in our system, specifically on, you know, all of the all the maintenance of all of our devices out in the field. So, um, what is the service delivery? What is the field service frequency that we send our techs out? How often are our devices going down? What are the components that end up, what is the failure rate on all these components? How much money do we spend when we have to get a service tech out there and we're overnighting, whatever that component is so we can replace it? Because at the end of the day, what is the impact? When something goes down unexpectedly, what's the impact? Here's the impact. It means that someone that was going to that hospital for their cancer treatment that day is told, I'm sorry, your treatment is canceled. The machine is down. We're going to have to reschedule you. That's the reality of if something breaks unexpectedly. And while, I'm not going to say that, someone has to reschedule one of their treatments, is it truly a life or death decision? You know what? In the mind of that patient, it absolutely is. I'm coming in, I am on a very tight regimented schedule of treatment.
Yep.
And suddenly I'm told, I'm sorry, we're going to have you come back, tomorrow or 2 days from now. To a patient, that literally is life and death. How do I know that tomorrow I'm going to be here? I need this treatment. And that's what we're trying to overcome. So what we're able to do is build algorithms that go through all of that data, all of that service history. And what we've been able to find is narrow down, those, as of now, two very specific components that we can now, with upwards of 90+% accuracy, know when they are going to fail. And now we don't wait for the failure to occur. We don't wait and then see that the machine is down, that patients that are coming are told, sorry, you're going to have to come back.
Yeah.
We're identifying when that component, let's say, hits 75% usage, we already proactively go out and we replace it.
Yep.
We're not waiting for downtime anymore.
Yep.
So while that is certainly provides, a cost savings for us, we're avoiding an emergency tech, we're avoiding overnighting parts and so forth. Think about what the intangible benefit is just to those doctors and the confidence they have in the treatment that they're providing, to the patients that are coming in and are getting their treatment when it's scheduled on time. There's a lot of business value there, but at the same time, it's just human value.
Yeah.
It's patient value. And that's one of our biggest goals is we don't necessarily interact direct with the patients, but we want our solutions that we're putting out in the field. We want to always think about what is the patient experience and how can we positively impact. Proactively avoiding downtime of any of our devices is one of the best things that we can do as an organization. Yeah. And using the data that we have, using the AI models that we built, that's allowed us to, take just that step. Think about all the other devices. Yeah. We haven't even ran those algorithms against the other devices yet. All the other components that are in our devices. We went after the top two, which makes sense, but we can become so much more from a quality perspective, from a reliability perspective, from a positive impact treatment perspective. We have all this at our fingertips now. And honestly, I can't get to it fast enough to really try and unleash the power of all this data that we have that can truly make a difference in what we're doing every day.
Yeah, I know for a fact that what you're describing is extremely portable. I would argue that predictive maintenance has been a pursuit for decades when it comes to any kind of, distributed asset pool, whether it's a medical device, whether it's a piece of equipment on a production line, whether it's a piece of mining equipment, right? The economics are almost identical, which is downtime is bad for everyone. Unplanned downtime is bad for everyone. It's costly. It's bad for suppliers, partners, customers, practitioners, everybody, right? And so what you're describing is a modern use case, but it ultimately has been a kind of a North Star for a long time when it comes to asset maintenance, asset management, asset performance optimization. And so you guys are living examples of how AI is just a giant tailwind to that effort, right? Which is still a worthy effort with a lot of payoff.
And you think about we've been sitting on the data for years.
Yep.
Other organizations, the same thing. It's taking something that we've already had And now finally having the tools and, the thought process around how much can we now do with something we've had for forever and we really haven't really gotten any value out of it. And some of the AI and the agentic solutions that are now coming forth are giving us that opportunity to think in ways that we had not thought before,
Right.
to really start to push those boundaries of where else can we bring this value to the table, notwithstanding even some of the back office that we are looking at, which
Right.
again, been there for forever. It's now the tools are finally catching up
Right.
to give us different solutions in terms of more automation of day-to-day processing,
Right.
accounts payable, accounts receivable, a
Yep.
lot of those functions,
Yep.
we can start to bring automation to the table that will allow our current, team members to focus more of their energy on more value add activities
Absolutely.
and not so much that repetitive, over and over, where AI can do that with, just as much 100% accuracy as an entire team that's doing that day in, day out.
Yeah, I mean, the office of the CFO is being completely disrupted in a good way
Mhm.
with regards to agentic specifically. You looked about, like you just said, accounts payable, invoice processing, financial close, all of
Mhm.
these laborious, data intensive exercises that would take hours and people,
And data.
can now, can ultimately be done almost hands free, not entirely, but it is transformational in a very literal sense.
Mhm.
I'm curious, Mike. I'm curious. Got a couple questions. I'm going to have to pick and choose because we are coming up on time. But with regards to NTT, then maybe you could just rewind a sec. What role have they played in this journey that you've been on?
Sure. So, like I said, we worked with Cognizant originally for the implementation.
Yep.
And then post implementation,
Hmm.
I knew that our long term support model for SAP was going to be working with an AMS partner.
Mm,
I do not have a small army of SAP folks at my disposal.
mm,
That's just not the IT resource model that we have in place.
hmm.
So, original thought, you go in, thinking best case scenario, Cognizant not only knows how we implemented the system, but who better to then stay on in a different capacity and then support the system
Mm.
as we move forward. For many reasons, that did not happen.
Yep.
Let's just say that any ERP implementation is going to have its challenges.
Hmm.
There's a lot of emotions,
Yeah.
that can happen, and it just over the course of those 2.5 years, we found that Cognizant did a great job as an implementation partner, wasn't really sure that they were the right partner to continue with moving forward,
Mm.
more from a working hand in hand day to day.
Yep.
So we did make that decision.
Got it.
We did still consider Cognizant as, a potential, but I went back out to market
Mm.
and said, there's obviously other players here. Let's really let's really make sure that we're making the right decision,
Yep.
not the easy decision. What's the right decision? And
Right.
ultimately, NTT, that's who we chose to partner with.
Yep.
Um, they came to the table with an AMS solution that was very attractive to us.
Hmm.
They what probably is one of my most beneficial takeaways that I got from working with NTT is the flexibility that they bring to an AMS model. Meaning, I have a definitive assigned number of resources that are assigned to our account. And it's not just resources, it's named people. That was important to us. We actually wanted the same named team members from NTT that would support us. But that being said, what do we have NTT work on for us? They work on defect resolution. They work on keep the lights on. They work on small enhancements that we make to improve the system. They work on very large projects. And on any given quarter, any given month, the mix of what that work is going to fluctuate. And what NTT Data allows is I can flex up or down and essentially at any time that I need to. Obviously, I'm going to give them a couple of weeks of notice, but I can flex up from a team of 17 to a team of 35 because let's say in the coming quarter I've got that much work and it's all time sensitive. I need to get all of this done in a given quarter or two. I can actually flex up. There's times where the organization can only handle so much change, and we may want to take a quarter off and say, you know what, this coming quarter let's just really tone it down a bit. Let's just focus on keeping lights on, maybe a couple of small enhancements here or there. But sometimes you just want to settle the waters. Just let's stay stable for a period of time. Let's get our users caught up. So then I can flex my dedicated resources down.
Yeah.
Not many AMS partners were able to offer that type of flexible support model that we enjoy.
Got
And
it.
believe me, I use it. I use it, you know, consistently all the time.
Yeah.
We like to plan our work on a quarter by quarter basis.
Yeah.
So I go into a quarter knowing, how much project work are we really going to make a commitment on? How many enhancements? What has our keep the lights on been looking like? And NTT is really, they're our partner every step of the way.
Got it. No, it's interesting. And Mike, you have your hands across the entire stack, right? The enterprise app stack, if you will. And we've
Yes.
only talked about a few. And I think the reality is that, I mean, you've got product lifecycle, you've got configure price quote, you've got CRM, you've got other applications. And as you know, the gold rush is on in terms of all of these app providers. They're trying to bake AI into their capabilities, infuse it, in many cases, re-platform, in many cases, make very aggressive claims about, they are now systems of action instead of systems of record, right?
Yep.
Basically hitching their wagon to the agentic AI juggernaut, right? And I'm just, it must be a challenge for you to be sort of trying to keep this all orchestrated into a whole, an enterprise tech strategy. And I wonder, how are you working across all the vendor relationships to, number one, is understand where they're going. Number two, potentially feed back into that, those thought processes in terms of, this is where we would like to see you guys go. And then number three, to your point, potentially make changes and go back out to market in some areas. And, there may be some providers you've worked with for a while that are not keeping up and you want to switch horses. And tell me a little bit about how you're juggling all of that.
So it certainly is a challenge.
Yeah.
And, you go back to, and this is probably going to date me, but so you go back to like the .com,
Yeah.
where it's the newest thing, it's flashy, everyone is jumping on board with it. And there's 1,001 different partners out there that you could work with, and everyone has a great story to tell.
Yeah.
I find that I'm going through the same type of, environment with AI. Everyone has AI now. Everyone's jumping on board. To your point, everyone's saying we've got AI embedded in our solution. This is what it can do. And what I found, and I hate having to use this terminology, but I will, you have to be able to separate the smoke and mirrors. And, no one is immune. And I will absolutely say that. We talk about Joule. I'm very excited about Joule and what it can do. At the same time, you really need to get past SAP's marketing in terms of what Joule can actually do and who's using it. I can't tell you how many events I've been at, whether it's a conference, whether it's meeting with other executives or so forth, where if I listen to SAP, Joule can do 450 out of the box AI capabilities right off the bat. So, pardon me. So by that definition, every SAP customer out there has got to be, leveraging it to its full capability. I would say that out of 50 companies that I might talk to that are also fellow SAP, less than 5 say they've actually implemented and turned Joule on and they're actively using it. So there is a difference in terms of what the marketing is saying, what the vendor is claiming versus what's actually happening out there. We do have Joule, and there's a lot that Joule can do, but there's a lot of setup that is required. It's not like flipping a switch. It's not like one day, you don't have it and now we've got Copilot and it's, on everyone's desktop. That's not how Joule works.
Yeah.
And what I found for most solutions is that they very much hype up, what are all the capabilities, but they spend very little time on, but what is the journey to get there?
Yeah.
How do we actually get to the point where this AI is embedded, it's there, we can use it seamlessly? there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And the
Yeah.
other piece of that is I don't want, 10, 15, 20 different AI solutions
Hmm.
all working in my environments because we do need to provide that governance. We do need to be careful about what data we're making available and what data we're not. I don't want any PII
Right.
data exposed to, the AI tools. I don't want PHI. We need to be very cognizant of the solutions that we're choosing to go forward with. What is the roadmap or where do we see this going? There's a little bit as AI continues to evolve and it's evolving fast.
Yeah.
There's a little bit about, thinking creatively and kind of making those decisions as you go. Take the information that you're gathering to help, further refine where your roadmap is going. But you
Yeah.
don't do this by the seat of your pants. We need to have a plan in place. We need to know where is the value that we plan to, pursue and deliver, back to our business functions. There's got to be a business case. There's
Yeah.
got to be value that is tangible and that we can measure. And that really goes more into being very deliberate about what AI solutions we're going to invest in, which ones are we going to make available into what data, and who's going to be using it.
Yeah.
Everyone in our organization has access to Copilot, and we really encourage the continued use from a day to day, on your desktop. I'm using AI in ways that I think make sense.
Yeah.
And we do try and educate our users on, here's some other use cases that you guys might not be thinking of, where you can go to Copilot and you're going to find a tremendous amount of value of things that you do every day.
Yeah.
That's different than, let's say, rolling out a Joule product
Yes.
where the data that it's pulling in is much different than what we, feed into Copilot. And we have to be, again, as I say, we have to be purposeful
Right.
about the solutions that we're using and
Hmm.
what is the intended outcome that we plan to deliver.
Yeah, it's so true. I'm curious. I was on a webinar yesterday put on by Anthropic, and
Yep.
what those guys are doing with Claude Cowork
hmm
specifically, and OpenAI is doing something very similar. We could talk for hours about this, but it just occurred to me. I'm curious if number one, if you're tracking what those guys are doing, it's early days, but they're basically they're trying to empower enterprises to commission and decommission digital workforce. In other words, agents, right? And deploy for all kinds of reasons, right? In a way that sort of coexists with enterprise applications per se, right? But this is
Yes.
a different on ramp into the enterprise tech stack, right?
Mhm.
These are not your traditional SaaS companies that are deploying apps and et cetera. These are AI native companies, as you know, that are empowering workers to effectively design tasks and then deploy and delegate those tasks
Mhm.
to agents, right? On in some cases pretty broad scale, right?
Mhm.
I'm just curious if you guys are you looking, are you tracking on what's going on? It's very early days. You know, companies like PayPal are claiming to be on that path. They were on the webinar
Mhm.
yesterday and they said that they're on that path with Anthropic, but even for them it's
Mhm.
early days, largely unproven.
Sure.
So it's kind of Wild West, but I'm curious if you're looking at that at all.
So, so short answer is yes.
Yep.
Is let's just admit it is moving very rapidly.
Yep.
From where AI was 6 months ago to where it is today
Yep.
is light years ahead. And the further we go, the more quickly it's going to continue to evolve,
Yep.
especially with so many players, coming to market.
Yep.
Anthropic's a great example. Very, very powerful tools that they are making available and what it can do. So absolutely staying relevant and up to speed on where is the industry going, what's happening, but also knowing that we're not going to be able to move as quickly as the innovations are. So understanding what's going on 100%, but you can't lose focus of trying to still keep up and watch what the next big thing is.
Yep.
When you're day to day,
Yeah.
there's value that you also need to be delivering to really, again, show that this is worthwhile the investment. show the CFO, show our executives, show our everyday users. This is where we're going from an AI perspective, and you're seeing the value, you're seeing the solutions that we're putting in your hands. You're seeing you know, the change that's occurring in how we do business. So yes, staying abreast of what are the big guys doing out there, what solutions are happening, but also knowing that we also have to be delivering day to day.
Yep.
And that's really where we focus right now is we have the tool sets that we've chosen. We're continuing to invest. We're continuing to develop. We just rolled out our first HR agent last week, and we're very happy with the results we're seeing there. So
Yep.
it's kind of don't get lost between the forest and the trees.
Yeah.
Because if you just want to keep staying abreast of the latest and latest and get there, you're always going to be chasing. You're
Yeah.
always going to be running. And you look back at, but what value have I delivered along the way? And if you
Yeah.
can't show that, if you can't tell that story, pretty soon you're not going to have the support to keep chasing the next AI,
Yeah.
shiny object because you haven't proven that you're doing anything with it.
Yeah. No, it's true. I was going to say, don't fall victim to the shiny object syndrome. And I think that's the takeaway there. And, Mike, gosh, I'm going to have to cut us off there, but I'm going to have you back because I have like a whole nother page of questions I want to ask you, but this has been awesome.